It started the way most tragedies in Alaska do, quietly, without warning, in the stillness of deep winter, when the snow seems to swallow every sound. February 2007 was colder than usual, the kind of cold that leaves frost patterns on the inside of your windows and makes the air feel like it could crack in your lungs. The Mercer family left their home in Palmer just after sunrise on a Saturday morning, bound for a weekend with relatives in Anchorage. It was supposed to be an easy trip, an hour and a half down the Glen Highway, but within their comfort zone. Frank Mercer was 42 then, steady man with the kind of patience you only got from years of working long shifts at the refinery. His wife Angela had been a nurse at the community clinic for almost as long as anyone could remember. Their kids, Emily and Josh, were 15 and 9, old enough to complain about long car rides, but young enough to be excited about seeing their cousins. Loaded up the family's green Ford Expedition with bags, snacks, and Emily's ever-present portable DVD player. The roads were icy but clear, the forecast was mild, and the trip should have been nothing more than an uneventful winter drive, except they never arrived. When they missed the family lunch in Anchorage, it didn't raise alarm right away. There was a storm in the forecast for later that evening, and everyone assumed they'd just stayed in Palmer. But by that night, when neither Frank nor Angela answered their phones, the first calls to neighbors went out. No one had seen them since they'd pulled out of their driveway that morning. By the next day, state troopers were searching the route between Palmer and Anchorage. Helicopters flew over the Glen Highway, scanning for wreckage. Search teams walked stretches of road where a vehicle could have slid into a ditch or down an embankment. They found nothing. No skid marks, no broken guardrails, no tracks leading off the road. It was as if the Mercers had been erased from the map. Days turned into weeks. Volunteers combed side roads and old trails, checking frozen river crossings, and snow-covered clearings where a vehicle might have gone unnoticed. The case made the local news, then faded as winter turned to spring. By summer, it was a cold case, the kind people brought up in hushed tones at the grocery store or at the diner counter. For 10 years, that's where it stayed. Then in January 2017, a hunter named Dale Wright was crossing the frozen edge of Lake Kessler, a small body of water about 20 miles off the main highway. He was checking his trap line, scanning the snow for movement, when he noticed something under the ice. At first, he thought it was a downed tree, the kind that got trapped in the lake during the spring thaw. But when the morning light shifted, he saw straight lines where no tree would have them, the glint of glass. And then, impossibly, the metallic green of a license plate. Dale drove straight to the nearest ranger station. By that afternoon, the area was taped off, and dive teams were called in from Fairbanks. News spread fast. The next morning, local radio stations were leading with it, possible breakthrough in decade-old missing person case, in a small cabin on the edge of town. Sam Mercer was splitting firewood when the announcer's voice came over the radio. Wasn't ready for it. Wasn't ready to hear his last name connected to a story he'd spent 10 years trying not to think about. Sam was Frank's younger brother. He's 10 years younger, the family's scroop by his own admission. He'd been the last person to talk to Frank the morning they disappeared. He still remembered the phone call Frank asking if the roads to Anchorage were passable, mentioning he'd heard the highway was a mess. Sam, nursing a hangover, had told him there was a back route through Kessler Lake Road that cut 20 minutes off the drive. He'd never driven it himself. He'd just heard it was scenic. Faster if you didn't mind a little ice. He hadn't thought about that conversation in years, not in detail. Not enough to remember the weight of it until the radio announcer said the words "vehicle located." Beneath the ice and license plates match, missing Mercer family. The maul slipped from his hands, hitting the snow with a muffled thud. His breath caught in his throat. 10 years of trying to tell himself they'd broken down somewhere, remote and frozen before they could call for help. 10 years of forcing himself not to imagine their last moments. By the time the dive team arrived the next morning, Sam was already parked at the edge of the tree line, hands in his pockets, watching through binoculars as men in bright orange suits moved across the lake. From this distance, the water looked like glass. The hole they'd cut in the ice, a perfect dark circle surrounded by white. Through it, He could just make out the faint teal shimmer of the expedition's roof. It was surreal, like the car had been parked there for a few days, not buried under 10 years of ice and snow. Detective Marla Grayson, the lead investigator on the original case, spotted him standing there. She was older now, hair touched with gray, but her eyes were as sharp as they'd been in 2007. She approached without smiling. "Sam? Marla, you sure you want to watch this?" "I've been watching it in my head for a decade," he said. "Might as well see the real thing." She nodded once, then handed him the binoculars. "They're about to bring it up." He steadied the lenses and focused. Ropes disappeared into the dark water, wrapping around the vehicle's frame. The crane operator signaled, and the cables tightened. Slowly the SUV began to rise. Sheets of ice cracked and fell away as the roof broke the surface, water streaming off it like melted glass. When the side windows cleared the waterline, Sam saw them. 4 silhouettes, frozen in place. He had to close his eyes just for a second. "There." "All there?" Marla said quietly. But as the vehicle swung free of the water, Sam noticed something strange. The driver's side window was cracked open 2 inches. The passenger side, too. And there were mark scratches on the inside of the driver's door. Fingernail scratches. "You think they were alive when it went in?" Sam's voice was rough. Marla didn't answer right away. "We'll know more after forensics." But Sam already knew. He could picture it: Frank trying to force the door open, his family trapped in the freezing dark while the ice closed in around them. And he knew something else, too. Frank wouldn't have driven out onto a frozen lake. Not ever. He hated ice. Roads refused to take them, even when they were thick enough to hold a truck. So why was he there? The answer hit Sam like a gut punch. Someone had made him. Marla's eyes stayed on the SUV as it was lowered onto the flatbed truck. Water pooled beneath it, steaming faintly in the bitter cold. "We'll get it to Anchorage for processing," she said. "We'll need you to come in and give a statement." Sam's gaze didn't move from the marks on the driver's door. "I already gave a statement 10 years ago. It's time you give me the one you didn't give back then." It landed like a stone in his gut, she knew. She'd always known he hadn't told her everything. Back in 2007, she'd asked him twice why Frank might have taken the Kessler Lake road. Both times, he'd shrugged it off, said Frank liked scenic routes. Never admitted he'd suggested it himself. He didn't answer now, just handed back the binoculars and started toward his truck. "Sam," her voice stopped him. "You think about why your brother was on that ice? When you're ready to talk, you call me." The drive home was a blur of snow and shadows. He didn't remember the turns, barely felt the ruts in the road. His cabin felt smaller than usual, the air stale and heavy. On the kitchen table was a photo from the last Mercer family barbecue. Frank with one arm around Angela, Emily making a face at the camera, Josh mid-laugh. Sam was behind the lens that day, complaining about the sun glare, never imagining it would be the last time they'd all be together. That night, he didn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the expedition breaking the surface. Water cascading off the roof, 4 shapes still in their seats. He imagined Frank gripping the wheel, telling the kids it was going to be okay, even as the ice cracked beneath them. By morning, made his decision. He called Marla. "I told him to take the lake road," he said without preamble. There was a long silence on the other end. "Why? I don't know. I was hungover. Heard from someone at work it was faster. Didn't even think about the ice. Just said it." "Who told you about it?" He rubbed a hand over his face. "Can't remember. Might have been at the bar. Maybe the yard crew." "That's important, Sam. Whoever told you may have known your brother would take your advice." She let that hang in the air for a beat. "Meet me at the station in an hour." 2 hours later, Sam was sitting in a cramped interview room that smelled faintly of coffee and damp wool. Marla set a recorder on the table, pressed the button, and sat across from him. "Let's go through this carefully," she said. "Start with the last time you spoke to Frank." He told her about the phone call. The way Frank had sounded tired but in good spirits. How he'd mentioned hearing about icy patches on the Glen and asked if there was a better route. How Sam had, without thinking, brought up the Kessler Lake road. Was there anything unusual about his tone? Nervous? Rushed? No, just normal. Anyone else with him? I could hear Angela talking in the background. Kids laughing, he swallowed. They didn't sound scared. Not then, Marla made a note. The person who told. You about the Lake Road think hard, Sam? He closed his eyes, sifting through hazy memories of beer bottles, cigarette smoke, and the low hum of conversation at the refinery break room. One face surface tall guy, worn ball cap pulled low, quiet but always watching. Harlan, he said suddenly. Harlan Briggs. Worked freight shifts. He was the one who mentioned it. Said it cut 20 minutes off the drive to Anchorage. Even joked about how the lake was prettier than the highway. Did he know Frank? Not really. Maybe in passing. Marla's pen stopped moving. Harlan still around? I haven't seen him in years. She stood. I'll find him. It didn't take long. Briggs still lived in the area, and a trailer tucked back from the road, surrounded by rusting snowmackins and stacks of firewood. Marla drove out that afternoon, Sam riding shotgun. Harlan answered the door in the same ball cap Sam remembered. His eyes flicked between them, assessing. Detective Sam. To what do I owe the visit? Marla didn't waste time. He recovered. The Mercer family's vehicle from Lake Kessler yesterday. Something shifted in Harlan's expression just for a second before it was gone. Yeah, I heard. Tragic. Spoke to Sam about the Kessler Lake Road before they disappeared. He shrugged. Might have. Folks talk about back roads all the time. Did you know Frank Mercer? Not really. Marla leaned in slightly. Then why recommend a shortcut you knew crossed a frozen lake in February? Harlan's jaw tightened. Wasn't my problem what they did with the information? Sam felt heat rising in his chest. You've set them up? Harlan's gaze slid. To him, cold and flat. Careful what you're accusing me of. Marla cut in before Sam could respond. We'll be in touch, Mr. Briggs. Back in the cruiser, Sam gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles ached. He knows something. He's hiding something, Marla agreed. But without proof, he's just a guy who runs his mouth about shortcuts. Then we find the proof? That night, Sam couldn't shake the feeling he was being watched. It was subtle, just the occasional glint in the tree line when he stepped outside to get wood, the faint crunch of snow underfoot somewhere beyond the cabin's light. He told himself it was nothing, just his mind playing tricks. But the next morning, he found boot prints in the fresh snow leading around the back of his cabin. Not his, not Marla's. Someone had been there. He didn't call the police. Didn't even tell Marla. He just grabbed his coat, got in his truck, and drove back toward Lake Kessler. If someone had wanted Frank on that ice, the lake itself might hold more answers than the SUV could. And Sam was done waiting for someone else to find them. The road to Lake Kessler was less a road than a suggestion. Narrow, packed snow, no signs, no guardrails. Sam kept the truck in four-wheel drive and followed the route the dive crews had used the day before. The lake was quiet now, the whole. In the ice already frosting over, a pale scar in the center of the frozen surface, he parked near the tree line and stepped out into the brittle cold. The only sounds were the groan of the ice under its own weight and the faint whisper of wind through the spruce. He walked to the shore, eyes scanning for anything the search teams might have missed. That's when he saw it half buried in a drift near the old boat launch. Scrap of metal, rusted at the edges, with a few stubborn flakes of white paint clinging to it. He brushed away the snow, revealing an Alaska license plate. Not from Frank's expedition. Different number, older style. Sam turned it over in his hands. The metal was warped, like it had been bent by force. The last 2 digits were almost unreadable, but the first 5 were clear enough. He pulled out his phone and snapped a photo. Low rumble made him freeze. An engine. He stepped back into the shadow of the trees, heart pounding. Dark pickup rolled into view, tires crunching over ice and snow. It stopped at the far end of the lake, near the tree line opposite him. Men got out. Heavy coats, hoods up, no visible insignia. They walked to the edge of the ice and stood there for a long moment, scanning the surface like they were looking for something. Then one of them gestured toward the boat launched toward where Sam stood. Hidden Sam didn't wait to see more. Slipped deeper into the trees, circling back to his truck. The men's voices carried faintly on the wind too far to make out the words. But their tone was sharp, purposeful. By the time he reached the road, he could hear the pickup's engine starting again. He didn't look back. At the station, Marla took one look at the license plate and swore under her breath. "This number's familiar," she said, tapping it into her computer. A moment later, she turned the screen so he could see. Registered to a 2004 Ford F-150 owner, Harlan Briggs. Sam felt his stomach drop. So he was here. At some point, she said, "We'll need to prove when and why." Before he could answer, another officer stuck his head in the door. "Detective, you're going to want to hear this." Followed him down the hall to the evidence room, where a diver from the recovery team was laying out items pulled from the expedition. Among the waterlogged maps and kids' toys was something that didn't belong to a cell phone. Frank's, not Angela's. A cheap, prepaid model? It's the kind you buy with cash and throw away? It was under the driver's seat, the diver said. "Battery's dead, but the SIM card's intact." Marla's expression hardened. "Run it. See if we can get the call history." An hour later, the results came back. One outgoing call, time-stamped February 10th, 2007, just after noon. Number traced back to another prepaid phone, subscriber unknown. But the signal had pinged off a cell tower less than 2 miles from Harlan Briggs's trailer. That night. Sam couldn't shake the image of those two men at the lake. Whoever they were, they hadn't been there to fish. They'd been looking for something, maybe the same thing he'd just handed over to Marla. At 2:17 a.m., his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. When he did, the voice on the other end was low, rough, and too calm. "You need to stop digging, Mercer." Sam's grip tightened on the phone. "Who is this? You keep looking for answers, you'll end up under the ice just like your brother?" The line went dead. He sat there in the dark, staring at the phone, listening to the wind claw at the cabin walls. For the first time in 10 years, the grief he'd carried turned into something else entirely. Anger. If someone had killed Frank's family, it wasn't going to stop until he knew who and why. And this time, he wasn't going to. Wait another decade to find out? The snow was falling thick by the time they reached the ridge marked on the map. Marla had insisted they wait until dawn, partly to avoid getting lost in the dark. Partly because they needed gear shovels, evidence bags, and a GPS tracker so the station could monitor their location. The hike took them nearly 3 hours. The circled spot turned out to be a clearing no bigger than a backyard, ringed with stunted birch trees. The snow here was strangely uneven, shallow in some spots. Like the wind had scraped it away, piled high in others. Sam scanned the ground. "This place doesn't look like much." Marla knelt near one of the shallow drifts, brushing away snow until her glove hit something solid, not rock wood. They worked in silence, scraping back layers of snow and ice until a weathered crate emerged. It was old, the kind with rusted metal bands and no markings except a faded, stenciled number on one side. Marla pulled a pry bar from her pack and worked the lid open. The smell hit them instantly: oiled, damp wood, and something metallic. Inside were long, heavy bundles wrapped in thick plastic. She slit one open with her knife and froze. Sam leaned closer. "Is that AK-47? She said quietly. "Dozens of them, all in good condition." Sam's pulse quickened. So this is what Frank saw. Marla didn't answer, just took photos with her phone, one after another. Then she pointed to the tree line. "This crate's been here a while, but look, fresh tracks." Sam followed her gaze. Sure enough, there were boot prints leading in. From the north and back out again, partially filled by new snow, but still visible. Whoever had been here hadn't buried the crate deeper. They'd been checking it. Marla zipped her coat higher. "This isn't just smuggling. This is weapons trafficking. And if Frank stumbled onto one of their drops, they couldn't let him leave." They worked quickly to document the scene, then covered the crate back up, leaving it exactly as they'd found it. Marla was adamant if they moved anything now, whoever owned it would know they'd been there. The operation would vanish before they could build a case. By the time they got back to the truck, it was nearly dark. Snow whipped across the road in ghostly sheets, and Sam had to lean forward to see through the windshield. They were halfway to town when the headlights caught movement. Figure standing in the middle of the road. Sam slammed on the brakes. The truck skidded, tires biting into ice before stopping a few yards short. The figure didn't move. It was a man wearing a heavy coat and a hood pulled low, face hidden in shadow. Marla's hand went to her weapon. "Stay in the truck." Stepped out, boots crunching in the snow. "State trooper," she called. "Identify yourself." The man didn't answer. Didn't even flinch then. Without a word, he turned and walked into the trees. Marla returned, eyes scanning the darkness. "No footprints." Sam frowned. "What do you mean, no footprints?" "I mean, the snow's untouched. It's like he wasn't there." The rest of the drive was silent, each of them locked in their own thoughts. Sam wasn't sure what rattled him more, of the crate of weapons buried in the woods, or the man who seemed to vanish into thin air. Back at the station, Marla locked the photos and GPS data in evidence storage. "This changes everything," she said. "If we can connect those weapons to Briggs, or whoever he was working for, we can tie it to Frank's death. And if we can't," her expression hardened, "then we've got a smuggling ring that's going to keep running right under our noses. And anyone who gets too close to it ends up under the ice." Sam finished. Marla didn't argue. That night, Sam dreamed of the lake again. Only this time, he wasn't watching the expedition. Rise from the water, he was inside it. The cold bit into his skin, and the water kept coming, filling the cabin, stealing his breath. He clawed at the door, nails tearing, but it wouldn't open. Through the fogged glass, he saw a figure standing on the ice above a man with no face. Just a shadow under a hood. Sam woke gasping, heart hammering, the echo of the dream still clinging to him, and somewhere deep down, he knew it wasn't just a dream. The next morning, Marla was waiting in the station's briefing room with a spread of printed photos across the table. Some were from the weapons cache they'd found in the woods. Others were grainy surveillance stills pulled from traffic cams. "Recognize anyone?" she asked. When Sam walked in, he leaned over the table. One of the photos showed a dark pickup, Harlan's passing through an intersection in town 2 days before his death. The driver was Harlan. Passenger was a man in a hooded coat, face obscured. "That him?" Sam asked. "Could be. Camera quality's garbage, but the build matches the man we saw on the road." Sam studied the still again. "If it is, he's not shy about being seen." "Or he doesn't care," Marla said. She tapped another photo. Satellite image from 10 years earlier. It's the lake, the ridge, and several faint trails leading between them. These tracks match the pattern from the map. And here she pointed to a faint square of disturbed earth near one of the other X's. "There's another cache, something buried. Another crate, could also be a grave." Sam's jaw tightened. "When do we go?" "Today." Before the weather shifts, the second X was harder to reach. The trail wound through a narrow ravine before climbing into a stand of black spruce. The air was dead still, the kind of cold that pressed in on you from all sides. They found the disturbed ground under a low-hanging branch. Snow covered most of it, but there was a depression in the shape of a rectangle. It's too neat to be natural. "This isn't cargo," Marla said quietly. They dug in silence, shovels cutting into the frozen crust until the metal hit something soft. The smell hit next to sour, sweet rot that didn't belong in the winter air. Marla knelt and brushed away more snow until fabric emerged. A coat, under it, bone. Sam swallowed hard. "How long's it been here?" "Years," she said. "Maybe a decade." He worked slowly, careful not to damage anything. The body was curled on its side, hands bound in front with a length of nylon rope. The skull was fractured in a way that wasn't from ice or a fall. "Execution," Marla said. Sam stepped back, trying to breathe through his mouth. "This isn't random. Whoever dumped him here knew no one would find him." "They were wrong," Marla said. She photographed everything, then called it in. The hike back to the truck was longer, the silence heavier. Halfway down the ravine, Sam stopped. "You hear that?" Marla froze. It was faint, almost lost under the muffled crunch of snow footsteps. Slow, deliberate, matching their pace. She turned, scanning the ridge above them. Nothing but trees and shadow. "Keep moving," she said. The sound followed them all the way to the truck. The body turned out to be a man named Victor Hale, Reported missing in 2008. No family in Alaska, no strong connections, just as seasonal. A worker who'd been hired and fired from a handful of remote jobs, but one of those jobs was with a freight outfit based near Kessler Lake. Sam recognized the name on the employee list, Harlan Briggs. Briggs worked with him. Sam asked. For 3 months, Marla said. Then Hale vanished. Now we know where he went. She slid a file toward him. Here's the kicker, Hale. It was last seen arguing with Briggs outside a bar in town. Witness says they were talking about cargo and a bad delivery. Sam leaned back in his chair. So Hale knew about the weapons, or something worse. Before he could ask what that meant, her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then handed it to him. The message was from an unknown number. It was a photo grainy, taken from a distance. Sam and Marla standing at the ridge that morning. They're watching us, Sam said. Marla's eyes were hard. They've been watching us since the lake. That night, Sam went home and checked every lock twice. He pulled the curtains tight, left the porch light on, and kept his phone within arm's reach. But sleep didn't come. At 3:14 a.m., the phone buzzed again. Another photo. This one was of his cabin. It's taken from outside. Close enough that he could see his own shadow through the curtains. Sam grabbed his coat and stepped outside. Flashlight. Sweeping across the trees. The cold air was sharp in his lungs, and the beam cut through drifting snow. Nothing moved, but just before he turned back inside, he saw a single boot print, fresh in the powder, leading toward the tree line. And next, to it, etched into the snow with the tip of a stick, were 2 words. Stop digging. By morning, the message in the snow was gone. Overnight wind had erased it, but Sam didn't need to see it to remember it. The letters were carved into his head as clearly as they'd been carved into the powder. He didn't bother with coffee. He drove straight to the station, the cabin's shadows still clinging to him. Marla was already there, a whiteboard behind her covered in lines, dates, and names. Looks like a murder wall, Sam said. It is, she replied. Except I think it's bigger than murder, bigger than smuggling. She pointed to the left side of the board where a column of dates ran from 1996 to 2010. Beside each was a name. Disappearances. All of them within a 50-mile radius of Kessler Lake. Some are single hikers, others entire groups. The official causes are all over the map. Weather, falls, hypothermia. But look at the dates. Sam scanned the list. They line up. Exactly. Every disappearance falls within 48 hours of a large shipment moving through the area. And every shipment involved one of 3 freight companies, 2 of which don't even exist anymore. The third still does. She underlined the name, Northern Haul Logistics. Frank's route, Sam said. Bingo. And here's where it gets interesting. She pulled a faded file from a stack. This is from 2002. A Northern Haul driver reported suspicious cargo loaded onto his truck at a remote airstrip. He filed a complaint. 2 days later, he disappeared. No truck, no body, case closed as an accident. Sam felt the air in the room tighten. Police just let it go. They didn't just let it go, Marla said. They buried it. Investigating officer marked the file inactive without ever visiting the airstrip. You know his name? She tapped the report. Sam read it, then froze. Lieutenant Darren Klein. Your old commanding officer, Marla said. Sam stepped back from the board, shaking his head. Klein's retired now, lives in Fairbanks, and has a pension that doesn't match a lieutenant's salary, Marla added. If he was in on this, he's been cashing in for decades. They left the station together, deciding to head for Fairbanks before the trail went cold. But they never made it to the highway. 3 blocks from the station. A black SUV blew through a red light and pulled across their lane, blocking them in. 2 men got out, both wearing the same dark coats as the ones at Harlan's place. Marla's hand went to her holster. Stay in the truck, she said, but Sam was already out. One of the men spoke. Detective, Mr. Mercer, you're making things difficult for people who don't like difficulty. Marla's stance didn't change. Get out of the road. Man smiled without warmth. You want to live? Drop the map. Drop the investigation. And forget the name Northern Hall. Sam stepped forward. Or what? The smile widened just a fraction. Or we find out how long you can last under the ice. The other man opened the SUV's rear door just enough for Sam to glimpse what was inside. A pair of cinder blocks tied together with rope. Marla's voice was flat. You threatening a state trooper? No, the man said, stepping back toward the SUV. I'm promising you a choice. They got in and drove away, leaving the smell of exhaust and the image of the cinder blocks burned into Sam's mind. That night, Sam didn't go home. He stayed in a motel off the highway, room door locked, pistol on the nightstand. But sometime after midnight, a sound woke him, a faint scrape, like something sliding under his door. He got up, crossed the carpet, and found an envelope on the floor. Inside was a single Polaroid. Frank's expedition, only it wasn't the one they'd pulled from the lake last week. The photo was dated February 12, 2007, 2 days after Frank's disappearance, and showed the SUV parked on dry ground. In front of what looked like a corrugated steel building, Sam stared at it until his vision blurred. If the date was right, Frank hadn't gone into the lake that day. Someone had put him there later, and now Sam had proofed in the morning. He showed it to Marla. She didn't even try to hide her reaction. This changes everything, she said. We're not looking at an accident at all. We're looking at a stage scene. And if the building in this photo still exists, we find it. We find out what happened to my family, Sam finished. Marla nodded. And we find out who's been keeping it quiet for 10 years. The steel building and the Polaroid became their entire focus. Marla fed the photo into image enhancement software at the station, zooming in on the background. The structure was partially obscured by snowdrifts and a battered fuel tank, but there was one key detail, a faded company logo on the far wall. It was barely visible. But when she adjusted the contrast, the letters came into focus. NH Northern Hall, Sam said. Not just Northern Hall, Marla replied. This version of the logo hasn't been used since 2008, which means the building's old, maybe abandoned. They kept it off official maps. But if we cross-reference aerial imagery from the right years, she pulled up a database of archived satellite photos. It took nearly an hour, but finally they found it. A squat, rectangular structure on the edge of a clearing about 15 miles northwest of Kessler Lake, near an unmarked road that hadn't been plowed in years. Bingo, she said. And it's close enough to the lake to explain how they got the SUV into the water without anyone seeing. Sam leaned over the map. We go now. Marla hesitated. We go carefully. If this place is still active, they won't exactly roll out a welcome mat. The road in was a frozen mess of ruts and ice. They ditched the truck half a mile from the building and went the rest on foot. The air was sharp, each breath crystallizing before it left their mouths. The building emerged from the trees like a block of shadow. The corrugated steel walls were streaked with rust, the logo faded almost to nothing. A set of wide loading doors stood closed, snow piled high against them. Marla crouched, scanning for movement. Looks dead. Sam's eyes swept the roofline. Dead things don't have fresh tire tracks. He pointed to a line in the snow leading to a side entrance, deep ruts from something heavy, likely a truck, and boot prints alongside. They followed the tracks to the side door. It was padlocked, but the lock was new shiny against the weathered metal. Marla pulled a lockpick set from her coat pocket. Cover me. It took less than a minute. The door creaked open, spilling dim light across the snow. Inside, the air smelled of oil, cold metal, something faintly chemical. The loading bay was empty except for a few wooden pallets and a set of tire chains hanging from a hook. But at the far end of the space, smaller interior door stood ajar. Marla led the way. The next room was worse. Rows of crates lined the walls, some open to reveal more weapons, rifles, shotguns, even a few cases of ammunition. But in the center of the room sat something covered by a heavy tarp. Sam pulled it back. Frank's expedition not submerged, not mangled by ice, just sitting there, dust coating the hood. All 4 tires flat. Sam stepped closer. The drivers. Side window was cracked open just enough to see inside. The seats were still there, so were the faint stains on the upholstery. Marla's voice was low. This is where they kept it before dumping it. Sam's hands curled into fists. They staged the whole thing. Put them in here, then. Yes. He trailed off, unable to finish. Marla put a hand on his arm. We'll get them, Sam. But we have to move. This place is too clean. They're coming back. They worked fast, photographing everything, snapping shots of the serial numbers on the crates, the SUV from every angle. Marla found a clipboard with shipping manifests, all written in code, stuffed it into her bag. They were about to leave when the sound of an engine rumbled outside. Marla's eyes met Sam's. Back door now. They slipped into the narrow corridor behind the loading bay just as the side door opened. Voices echoed in the cold air. 3 men, one giving orders, the others laughing like they'd just come in from the bar. Sam risked a glance through a gap in the wall. One of the men was the hooded figure from the road. The other 2 he didn't recognize. But they moved like people used to carrying weight, either gear or guns. The hooded man stopped near the SUV, running a hand along the roof. We move it tonight. Ice is still thick enough. One of the others asked something Sam couldn't hear. The hooded man's answer was clear enough. No, we don't wait. If they're sniffing around, we drop it and make sure it's not coming back up this time. Marla's grip on Sam's sleeve tightened. We're leaving. Now. They retraced their steps through the corridor and out into the snow, keeping low until the building was lost behind the trees. Only when they were back at the truck did either of them speak. They're going to sink it again, Sam said. Marla nodded grimly. Then we get to it first. Back at the station, they pulled up the satellite maps again, tracing the routes from the building to the lake. There were 3 possible entry points for a vehicle, each leading to a stretch of ice thick enough to take the weight at least for now. Marla marked them all. They'll have to move at night. Less chance of being seen. That gives us a window. But it's narrow. Sam stared at the map. Wait. We risk missing them. We go now. We might catch them in the act. Marla looked up at him. I'm done waiting. By sundown, the sky had turned to slate, and the wind off Kessler Lake carried a sharp bite. Sam and Marla parked a half-mile away and hiked in on foot, using the tree line as cover. The lake stretched out before them, a vast sheet of dark ice. The snow on its surface swept into rippling patterns by the wind. They chose the southern inlet as their stakeout point. It was one of the 3 possible drop zones they'd identified close to shore, with a gradual slope into deeper water. From there, they could see the other 2 spots if they used binoculars. The first hour passed with nothing but the groan and crack of the ice under shifting temperatures. Then, just after 9, faint headlights cut through the trees on the far side of the lake. Marla raised her binoculars. Truck large. Looks like a tow rig. Sam could make out the dark shape of the expedition chained to the back. The tow truck rolled slowly out onto the ice, tires crunching, chains clinking against the metal frame. 3 figures followed on foot, 2 carrying rifles slung across their backs. The third wearing the same hooded coat Sam had seen twice before. That's him, Sam muttered. Marla's voice was low. We move when they're halfway. Gives them less time to react. They waited. The tension coiled tight between them. When the truck reached the center of the inlet, Marla tapped his arm. Now they broke cover, sprinting across the ice. The hooded man was the first to notice, his head snapping toward them before barking an order. The 2 armed men swung, their rifles around, but Marla's sidearm was already up. Drop it, she shouted. For a moment, the scene froze, wind howling, chains rattling, breath steaming in the cold air. Then one of the gunmen fired. The shot ricocheted off the ice. In a sharp, ringing crack, Sam dove behind the low ridge of a snowdrift, returning fire with his pistol. Marla advanced in quick, low steps, her shots deliberate. One of the riflemen went down, weapons skittering across the ice. The tow truck's engine roared as the driver tried to push forward. But the chained expedition bogged in a patch of slush. Wheels spinning us lessers. Sam closed the distance, grabbing the driver's door and yanking it open. The man inside swung at him with a crowbar, but Sam caught his wrist, twisting until the metal clanged to the ice. The hooded man was moving toward the far shore now, abandoning the vehicle entirely. Sam took off after him, boots slipping on the ice. "Stop," he shouted. The man didn't stop. Didn't even look back. Sam caught him just before the tree line, tackling him into the snow. They rolled, fists connecting in wild, brutal arcs. The hood slipped back for the first time, and Sam found himself staring into a face he hadn't seen in years creased. Weathered, but unmistakable. "Colt," Sam breathed. Frank's old friend, the one who'd worked for Northern Hall. The one who'd vanished 6 months before Frank died. Colt's grin was jagged. "You should have stayed home, Mercer." He slammed his forehead into Sam's, breaking his grip, and bolted into the trees. By the time Sam staggered up, Colt was gone. They hauled the expedition back to shore under police guard. The inside was stripped. No personal items, no DNA, just a bare shell. "They cleaned it," Marla said, frustration in her voice. "They knew we'd find it." Sam stared at the empty interior, the echo of Colt's grin still burning in his mind. He was there. Marla, the day Frank vanished. He was part of it. "Then we find him," she said, "and we find out who's paying him." By the time the sun came up over Kessler Lake, the expedition was locked in the evidence bay under guard. Marla had already sent the serial numbers from the tow rig and the truck's remaining parts. Through every database she could access, Colt wasn't in any of them, not under that name anyway. "His real name's Colton or Hale," she said when Sam came in. "Born in Anchorage, bounced between seasonal jobs and small-time freight gigs, did a 6-month stint in county for assault. No fixed address for the last 10 years. Sam leaned over the desk. "Hale, any relation to Victor Hale?" Marla nodded. Slowly, I checked. "Younger brother." Sam let out a long breath. "The body we found in the ravine." "Yeah," Marla said. "Looks like Victor knew something, same as Frank. And Colt's been carrying that grudge for a decade." She slid a new file toward him. "But here's the interesting part. Colt shows up on a payroll record for Northern Hall dated 2 weeks. Before Frank's disappearance, then nothing. He drops off every official record until last night." Sam stared at the page, jaw tightening. "So he's been working for them all along, hiding in plain sight," Marla said. "Small towns, cash jobs, staying off-grid. But you can't move freight like they do without leaving some kind of trail." She tapped the manifest clipboard they'd recovered from the steel building. "If we can crack this code, we'll know every drop point they've used in the last 10 years. They took the manifest to an analyst in Anchorage who owed Marla a favor. By mid-afternoon, they had a partial Keitha. Codes were combinations of numbers and letters that corresponded to geographic coordinates, but scrambled through a simple substitution cipher. When they ran the first decoded set, Sam felt the hair on the back of his neck rise. The coordinates matched the locations of multiple unsolved disappearances from Marla's murder wall. "This isn't just weapons," Marla said quietly. "These drops are tied to people, victims, bodies." Sam's voice was low, and Frank was one of them. That night, Sam went back to his motel instead of the cabin. He didn't trust the woods around his place anymore. At 2:07 a.m., his phone buzzed on the nightstand. "No caller ID," he answered without thinking. "You're not going to stop," Colt's voice said. "It wasn't a question. Not until I know what happened," Sam replied. A pause, then a low chuckle. "You think you want the truth? The truth doesn't care what you want." "Where's Frank's body?" Sam demanded. Silence. Then, under the ice isn't the worst place it's been. The line went dead. In the morning, Marla played the recording from Sam's phone for the state police commander. It wasn't enough for a warrant, but it was enough to get authorization for a covert surveillance operation targeting the last 3 active Northern Hall drop sites. They split the team. Marla took one, Sam and 2 officers took another. Third was left to a drone operator positioned miles away. Sam's site was a clearing deep in the forest, accessed by a narrow service road. They'd been in position less than an hour when headlights appeared in the distance. A single truck. Markings it rolled into the clearing and stopped. The driver, Colt, got out. Sam's pulse kicked hard. Colt went to the truck bed, pulled a tarp, and began unloading something wrapped in black plastic. He moved with the casual rhythm of someone who'd done this dozens of times. Sam raised his camera and started taking photos. But then Colt stopped, looked directly toward their position, and smiled. "How the hell?" one of the officers whispered. Colt lifted a hand in a small, mocking salute. Then he walked back to the cab, got in, and drove away. When they approached the bundle, Sam's stomach turned. It wasn't a crate this time. It was a body bag. The body bag was stiff from the cold, the zipper frozen shut in places. Marla arrived 20 minutes later, snow dusting her coat, her expression grim. Together, she and Sam forced the zipper down. Inside was a man in his 50s, face pale and waxy eyes half open in a frozen stare. There was a single gunshot wound in the center of his forehead. His hands were bound with the same nylon rope they'd found on Victor Hale. Marla crouched to look closer. Name's Daniel Croft. Former city councilman went missing 3 days ago. Sam frowned. Why would they take him? Maybe he got in the way, Marla said. Or maybe he knew too much. When they rolled the body, an envelope slipped from inside his coat. Sam caught it before the wind took it. Inside were several photographs, grainy, taken at night. They showed the steel building, the weapons crates, and one shot of Colt shaking hands with a man in a suit. Sam stared at the suited man's face. That's Chief Rowan, the chief of the state police. Marla took the photo, her jaw tightening. If this is real, then the top of the ladder is rotted through. They took the evidence to the state commander who'd greenlit their surveillance op. He listened, looked at the photos, and shook his head. Rowan's been in law enforcement. For 30 years, you're accusing him of aiding a trafficking ring without proof beyond a blurry handshake? Marla's voice was flat. We've got coordinates for drop sites, bodies turning up with the same bindings, and a link to a sitting police chief. If that's not enough to dig deeper, what is? The commander leaned forward. You want my advice? Leave this one alone. For your own good? Sam felt the old anger flare. That's the same thing they told me when Frank died. The commander didn't blink. And you're still here, aren't you? They left the meeting empty-handed, but Marla's mind was already turning. If Rowan's in this, he's not moving crates himself. He's coordinating using his position to shield Northern Hall. We need to find his contact with Colt. Sam's eyes narrowed. And that means baiting him into moving something big. Marla gave a thin smile. Exactly. Right. That night, Sam returned to his cabin for the first time in days. The snow around the porch was undisturbed, no footprints, no sign of visitors. He built a fire, sat down with a mug of coffee, and let the heat seep into his bones. The phone rang just after midnight. Unknown number, he answered. You don't listen, Colt's voice said. Sam didn't respond. You think Rowan's your answer? He's not. He's just the one they let you see. Who's they? Sam asked. Colt chuckled, low and humorless. The people who decide what gets buried and what gets frozen. Before Sam could say more, the line went dead. Next morning, Marla came in with news. We've got a hit on one of the old coordinates from the manifest. Remote cabin, only accessible by snowmobile this time of year. I think it's their meeting point. Sam pulled on his coat. Let's go. They took 2 sleds out along. The frozen river, the engine noise swallowed by the vast silence of the wilderness. The cabin came into view just before dusk, small, weathered. Smoke curling from the chimney, they killed the engines 100 yards out and approached on foot. Through the frosted window, Sam saw 3 men around a table. One was Colt. Another was Chief Rowan. The third was a stranger in a dark parka, his back to the glass. Then the man in the parka turned slightly and Sam's breath caught. He knew that face. He'd seen it in old family photos, at Frank's wedding, even at his parents' funeral. It was their uncle. Sam's boots felt glued to the snow. His uncle Harold Mercer sat in that cabin like it was the most natural thing in the world. Leaning back in his chair, a mug in one hand, talking easily with Chief Rowan and Colt. Marla touched his arm. "We need to think before we move." Sam's voice was low, tight. "I've been thinking about this for 10 years. They circled to the back door, guns drawn. Marla counted down with her fingers 3, 2, 1, then kicked it open. The men inside shot to their feet. Colt's hand went to his coat, but Sam's weapon was already aimed. "Don't," Rowan froze, eyes narrowing. Harold didn't even flinch. "Well," Harold said, "looks like the boys finally caught up." The next few minutes were a blur, Marla cuffing Rowan and Colt, Sam keeping his gun trained while they were searched. Harold didn't resist, didn't move, didn't stop smiling. "You think this changes anything?" Harold asked. "It changes everything," Sam said. Harold shook his head slowly. Frank didn't understand either. Thought he could take a little truth and make it fit his nice, clean world. Didn't work out for him. Sam stepped closer. "Tell me, you sure?" Harold's voice was almost gentle. "Oh, truce colder than that lake. Tell me." Harold leaned back, the cuffs clicking behind his chair. Frank took a run for Northern Hall. Simple job, no questions asked. But he looked in the wrong crate, saw what was inside. Not just guns, not just drugs. Something worth more than both. And he started talking about going to the police. About telling you. Sam's stomach turned. "So, you killed him." "I saved him," Harold said. "From what happens when you cross the people who own this state." Rowan wanted him gone quick. Colt had other ideas. Said we could use him to send a message, so we kept him for a while. Hand tightened on the gun. "Where is he?" Harold's smile didn't fade. "Parts of him are still in that lake. But the rest, long gone. Scattered where no one will ever look."
"How long, Marla?"
Broke in, voice clipped. "We're taking them in." They loaded the prisoners onto the sleds, binding them tight. But halfway back to the river, headlights flared in the trees. 3 snowmobiles roared into view, black-clad riders blocking the trail. Sam swerved, Marla right behind. The first shots cracked through the air, snow exploding around them. One of the sleds carrying Rohan tipped, filling him into the drift. Colt used the chaos to break free, diving off the sled and vanishing into the trees. "Go," Marla shouted. Sam hesitated, torn between chasing Colt and keeping Harold in custody. Harold watched him, calm as ever. "Doesn't matter, boy. You're not done yet. You'll never be done." Sam shoved him back onto the sled and gunned the engine. They didn't stop until the lights of town came into view. Back at the station, Rowan was locked in a holding cell. Harold sat in an interrogation room, sipping coffee like a guest instead of a suspect. Colt was gone. Marla leaned against the wall. "We got the chief. We got your uncle." "That's a hell of a start." Sam stared through the glass at Harold. "It's not enough. Not until I know exactly what was in that crate," the thing Frank saw. Marla met his eyes. "Then we go back to the lake." The ice groaned under their boots as they crossed Kessler Lake one last time. The sky was iron gray, the wind cutting sharp through their coats. Behind them, 2 other officers dragged a sonar sled, scanning the lake bed for anything metallic. Marla checked her GPS. "This is the drop point Colt mentioned on the wire years ago. Depth's about 30 feet here." They drilled through the ice, lowered the sonar. The screen flickered, then painted a shape rectangular, large. With jagged edges from where it had struck the bottom, Sam's pulse jumped. "That's it, divers." Went in, tethered by thick ropes, their lights cutting narrow cones through the dark water. 10 minutes later, they broke the surface, gasping in the cold air. "We found it," one said. "Crate's intact. We'll need the winch." The operation took hours. The crate broke the surface just before dusk, water streaming from its seams. The wood warped, but unbroken. They pried it open with crowbars. Inside were smaller sealed cases, military grade, marked with stenciled codes. Marla cracked one and froze. It wasn't guns, it wasn't drugs. It was vials. Dozens of them, labeled with codes Sam didn't recognize, each containing a pale, viscous fluid. Marla's voice was tight. Biological agents. Weaponized. Sam stared at the rows of vials. Frank saw this, and that's why they couldn't let him live, Marla said. Back at the station, Harold was waiting. He'd heard about the recovery, and when Sam walked into the interrogation room, he gave a slow, almost approving nod. So you dug it up. Sam sat across from him. Frank didn't die in an accident. He died because you chose a paycheck. Over your family, Harold's expression didn't change. Chose survival. Those vials were worth more than you can imagine. You think Rowan was the top? He was a clerk compared to the people behind this? Frank was a good man, but good men don't last long in this world. Sam leaned forward. And you will? Harold's eyes glittered. For a while. 2 days. Later, federal agents arrived. Rowan was transferred into their custody. The vials were sealed and flown out under heavy guard. Colt was still out there. Sam stood on the shore of Kessler Lake, watching the snow drift over the new ice where the hole had been. Marla joined him, hands in her pockets. Not the ending. You wanted, she said. No, Sam replied, but it's an ending. She glanced at him. For now, Sam didn't answer. He knew she was right. Colt was still breathing. The network was still out there. And somewhere buried under years of lies and cold water were pieces of Frank that would never be found. The wind rose, rattling the bare branches along the shore. Sam turned and walked back toward the truck, leaving the lake and its secrets behind, at least until the ice decided to give up something else.